about a 61% decline in traffic on a normal day. And then we were seeing some numbers from GDOT on some of the interstates in 400. There's some huge declines, easily more than 50%, depending upon the location. Very looks very different when you go out during rush hours.
I guess that's why everybody's speeding and so many speeding
Yeah,
tickets.
that's one that is actually one outcome of the less traffic, and it's just different dynamics now. Fewer cars should really fewer accidents, which is good. I think that's gonna be true when we look at the data, but then the
perhaps ate out at a restaurant this evening, but thank you all for tuning in and our new virtual reality. So I am going to call this meeting to order. And this is a work session that I'm going to turn over to Mohammed Rauf. And he is going to talk with us about bridge aesthetics. And I know he'll fill you in, but as you know, we had numerous committee meetings regarding the topic. So let's just go from there. Mohammed.
Thank you, Mayor. So I want to share my screen.
Thank you.
So can you guys see the slide, the bridge aesthetics work session?
And
oh, thank you so much. So hopefully everyone is doing okay. So we'll just go ahead and get started. So this is our work session for the bridge aesthetics. So we're going to be talking about the 3 future bridges in the city of Roswell over Georgia 400, the 400 and Holcomb Bridge Interchange Bridge, the future express lane bridge to be built by GDOT as part of the express lane project, and then city's project, the Big Creek Parkway Bridge over 400. So we're going to be talking about the bridge aesthetics for all 3 bridges in different parts of this work session tonight. So just to give you some background and refresh our memory on some of the things. So we've been talking about, different elements. We had a work session in October, then we did the first public survey on the topic. That's where we were talking about the type of upgrades do we want to see on or around these bridges. So that was the first public survey done in November. And then we had a committee meeting, then a December 9th city council meeting where a lot of information was provided and the city council made certain decisions to move in a certain direction. And our task was, as required by GDOT, to get the information over to GDOT by the end of the year. And we did that. The decisions you made at that council meeting were communicated to GDOT. And then in February, GDOT responded to us with a letter agreeing to pretty much everything that we asked for. And as anticipated, they said any upgrades, any additional elements the city wants, the city's got to pay for those, which we kind of knew going in. So now that we have told GDOT what type of upgrades do we want, and GDOT has agreed, now is the time to kind of figure out the design and specification, meaning for you guys, the look of some of those aesthetics that you wanted to see. So this is all about the look and feel, the aesthetics piece of that. So we conducted a public survey just in the last couple of weeks. I'll be sharing the results of that tonight, and just need some guidance from you to get back to GDOT where they're requesting some design and specification of the upgrades the city wanted on the bridges. And June 3rd is our deadline to get back to GDOT, but of course our consultant needs some time to prepare that information after you give us some guidance tonight. So that's why we have this time flexibility in there. And then during summertime, we'd be signing another IGA with GDOT. That's where everything gets listed again and we all agree formally. And then GDOT is still continuing with the schedule of actively moving forward with their procurement. So any decisions we have been making and communicating to GDOT has been responding and including those in their procurement documents as we go. So just a quick recap of the upgrades the city decided to do, and then those have been communicated to GDOT. So the city wanted brick form liner, as shown in graphic that's coming up in the next couple of slides. We talked about an upgraded decorative fencing along the bridges, not just a very basic chain link fence that the GDOT would do if the city didn't ask for anything more. We asked for additional trail connections, like on the express lane bridge. GDOT was not going to do any pedestrian accommodation, but we asked for adding a trail onto it. And we also talked about and agreed to do a hardscape barrier wall, 2 to 3 feet high barrier wall with a brick look in lieu of the planters, because the initial cost of planters on the bridge was going to be a lot higher. And then, of course, there's this lifelong maintenance of any uh, landscaping we put in. So the upgrades that the city council decided not to include, generally because of the cost reason, is that no brick form liner underneath the bridge or on the ramp walls, or anywhere else other than the bridge itself. No landscaping on the bridge because of, again, the initial high costs, and then the future maintenance costs of those. And then no enhancements to any of the retaining walls. We just figured that some of the standard wall facings that GDOT uses, there were a couple that had a reasonable look, so that's why the city decided not to spend any extra money on those. And then no landscaping on the bridges and not on any of the approaches for now, although the landscaping on the approaches and off the bridges could always be added later. So as you saw, the estimated cost of all these upgrades, as communicated to you in the December council meeting, is 2.1 million. You saw the same number before. This still needs a final, review by GDOT. So the cost may vary a little up or down based on GDOT's review. And the future optional upgrades that the city council chose not to do at this point, the cost of those could be $8 to $11 million. So we are enabling a lot of upgrades by paying the 2.1 million for now. And these future upgrades, the city may or may not want to do them, not in the near future, not in the maybe never. It just depends. So the items that were communicated to GDOT, I got a list of 5 items. So the first one was, this is in the graphic, you see the future Holcomb Bridge. So it's two bridge structures, and we're only talking about the outside walls that are orange highlight, with the concrete monument and the parapet wall. So an upgraded parapet wall with the concrete monument with the brick facing. So that's, of course, all GDOT accepted all of them. So this one got accepted too, and that's where GDOT needs some details on the design and specifications. The next one is the decorative fencing on the outside barrier walls on both bridges. So when we say both bridges, that's the Express Lane Bridge and the future 400 and Holcomb Bridge interchange bridge. So again, you see the orange highlights here. So we're talking about the decorative fencing here. So that's also acceptable to GDOT as long as it meets their criteria. So that's where we got out and got some public input on the look of that fence that the city is going to be paying for. And the next one is the city's request of a 8-foot sidewalk on the express lane bridge on one side only, where they will not have any interaction with the traffic. So for that, of course, we needed an extended bridge deck to accommodate the 8-foot sidewalk. So that's what GDOT accepted, but the city would be paying, and GDOT needs some detail on this one as well. Next one is the specialty barrier wall adjacent to the sidewalk. So this is where the pedestrian and the vehicular traffic get separated by this barrier wall. It's going to have a brick look, and this one got very well liked in the public survey, because people want that safe feeling as they're walking along roads like Holcomb Bridge. So of course, GDOT accepted this one as well, and we just need to give them some design and specification details. Another thing, we asked for only the Holcomb Bridge is this decorative specialty sidewalk. to match with what we have existing on the approaches to the bridge that were constructed as part of our westbound through lane project. So we asked only on the Holcomb Bridge, not on the express lane bridge. So GDOT expected, and we'll just share our design specs with them on this one. So here's what the Holcomb Bridge could look like. So remember, I mentioned that the brick look the city wanted. So it is shown on this one. So only like the top half of the bridge and those monuments. And then if you note, the bottom of the bridge is all plain concrete, the abutments, the sides, is all plain. We get the brick formwork only on the top of the bridge with those monuments and the lighting fixtures. And just look at the fence. This is like one option of the upgraded fence where we got public input. If you notice the square shape fence element and then a little arch at the top of the fence. So all this is where we got the public's input on what they would want to see. This is just another view of the future Holcomb Bridge. So remember the diverging diamond interchange uh, concept that GDOT has been working on for the future Holcomb Bridge. This is the graphic of that. So it shows you the both bridge structures, so two separate bridges. And then if you notice on a DDI, that's a diverging diamond interchange, and examples of those in the area are 85 in Jimmy Carter and 85 in Pleasant Hill and Ashford Dunwoody 285. So a couple, three examples in the area. So on a DDI, all the pedestrian and bicycle movements are happening on the inside of the two direction of traffic. So what you see here is you see one direction of the traffic and then the pedestrians on the inner side. And then on the other side, you see the other direction of traffic. And then in between the two bridges is where the future transit station elements could go in. So there's going to be the spacing between the two bridges to accommodate a future transit station elements. And as you can notice, there is this transit bus has a pullout, so that becomes part of the construction. And this is a bus pullout for the future transit station riders. This is a view from a future sidewalk on Holcomb Ridge. So like we talked about the specialty sidewalk, you see that here on the left. You see the fence with an arch on it, and on the inside is just a basic fence. So we're not asking for an upgrade because it's on the inside, and it has an overhang that's just for safety reasons for pedestrians. So that overhang could be installed on any type of the fence. Next, this is the express lane bridge to be built by GDOT. So this is where, if you remember, this was just a south-facing bridge. So we're looking to the north in this picture, and then the ramps are going southward. So you can only go south and come from the south to use this express lane bridge. And if you notice, the pedestrian accommodation, the trail is only on one side, which is the north side, and the pedestrians and bicycles will not have any interaction with the vehicles that are turning on and off of the express lane bridge. Now this is again a street view of the express lane bridge. You could see pedestrian accommodation on one side and not on the other. And this is the street view from the sidewalk. Again, you see the fence on both sides of it with the overhang on the pedestrian side for safety reasons. So the options for these two, so the Holcomb Bridge interchange and the express lane bridge, they are going to get constructed as part of GDOT's express lane project. For the Holcomb Bridge, city has a financial partnership with GDOT. For the express lane bridge, that's all paid for by GDOT, and the city is just paying for the upgrades that the city wanted. So the cost, like I mentioned, is the same number as you heard in December, 2.1 million. It's still subject to GDOT's final review of all the detailed design specification we are going to submit to them after you give us some guidance tonight. And there's one more point that we made before this 2.1 million, the estimated 2.1 million. The city's request was to for the city to pay that in installments, 6 installments starting from 2021 to the year 2027. GDOT has said no to that for now. So staff has a suggestion for you to consider, and we'll talk about it in the end again. But I just wanted to refresh your memory that that's installment is one thing we talked about before for this bridge aesthetics cost. So those are the two bridges for the interchange for the express lane project to be built by GDOT. And now the third bridge over 400 in the city is going to be the future Big Creek Parkway Bridge. That's the built to be built by the T-Splost funding, and the city's gonna be the lead. Well, city's gonna construct that bridge. So we have about $2.5 million in the budget for the statics on that bridge, and that aesthetics, as you see in the graphic on the screen now, that was for those statics that got approved by the city council back in the year 2013. But then more recently, in the end of the year 2019, in the work sessions committee and the public survey we conducted before, the guidance from the council was to match aesthetics on all three bridges, just to give that unique Roswell look to all three bridges, and they should look the same. So that was the guidance given by you. So one guidance we need today from you is to formally say that yes, we want to make all three bridges the same, and we'll have to. The cost of the aesthetics on this bridge would probably be about the same or maybe less than the number shown here, the 2.5. So we want to match the aesthetics on this to the other two bridges based on the guidance you give us today. So the survey that was put out in the last couple of weeks, we got a very good response yet again on that. So we kept it open for 10 days, April 20th, April 10th to the 20th, and we got 645 responses. That's many times more than any of our physical public input meeting that we have done in the past. So this is great response. So we asked the public 4 questions, and I'll just go briefly over these. So the first one is, as you can see in the pictures, the question was if the citizens preferred the stamp brick as in the bottom picture, or I'm sorry, as in the top picture. I'm sorry, confusing. The stamp brick one is the bottom picture. It's all brick, and the sandstone insert is on the top picture that you see, where you see the 3 red arrows. So that's the difference. This question one was about the sandstone insert or just the stamp brick. So 56% majority said they like the top picture, which is the sandstone insert. And the second question was if they like the square or the vertical fence design. So as you can see in the top picture, you have those square shaped elements in the fence, and the bottom, it's all vertical. So a majority of 83% like the square shaped fence that you see in the top picture. The third one is about the arch on the top. So the top picture has arches on the top of the fence. The bottom pictures does not, and 72% of the people who took the survey said they liked the look with the arches. Question 4 was just a generic question if they wanted to provide any additional feedback. So out of the 645 citizens, about 125 gave us some additional thoughts on that. And then generally, a huge majority was positive response. And, talking about that barrier between the pedestrian and the vehicular traffic lane was one thing that I read many times. So we got some really good input, and people like I guess like the sustainable improvements that don't go too fancy and then later on not have enough to maintain. That's like maybe hinting towards landscaping. So people wanted just consistent look that could stay good for many years to come. And then this is just zip codes that participated in the survey. So that's all on the public survey. So staff's recommendation is to move forward based on the positive response we got from the survey. So that means the squared fence design with the arch style tops, and then the monuments with the sandstone concrete accents on the exterior facing bridge walls. So these are the two things on the aesthetics that we need that we need your decision on. And then this one is on the payment option where I was talking about the installment option for the estimated $2.1 million cost of these aesthetics and upgrades. Uh, Staff's recommendation would be to wait for the summertime when GDOT is going to come to us to get that IGA executed. That's a conversation we could have at that time because we'd be talking about a lot of other stuff as well. So that's staff's suggestion on that. And we're recommending approval on the aesthetic options to proceed for the 400 and 400 Holcomb Bridge interchange and the express lane bridge, and then again apply the same aesthetics to the Big Creek Parkway bridge. And then last one is just a question if this is generally just moving into one direction, getting guidance from you. If maybe that's a question for the mayor. If you still want to bring this to a council meeting on May 11th, we can. Otherwise, I think we can get the guidance tonight and just communicate that to GDOT. So that's all the slides I had, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
I have a question.
Well, excuse me. Thank you, Director Ralph. I would like to do this a little bit more formally because we are on a Zoom meeting. If normally we would just keep this as open comments, which I have not opened them yet, but when we go to open comments, I would like to ask you all to raise your hands because sometimes with the Zoom meeting and the delays, you get two people talking at the same time. So we're just trying to move our way through this and make sure that we listen to everyone. So if you would raise your hands, and then we, staff will take comments and questions. Thank you, Councilmember Hall.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Mohammed, could you let me know, as far as the survey, were the costs equal for both options, or was one option more expensive than the other? I guess because there was nothing talking about cost differences there, is it fair to assume that these are equal costs, like the stamped brick with or without sandstone and the vertical and the square fence?
Yes, that's a great question. I meant to mention that. So yes, when the city council approved us moving forward back at December 9, 2019 council meeting, they approved this number, which is this estimated 2.5 million. So all the options that we are considering, they are within that price range. So that's why you are only seeing two options of the fence, that they both meet the same price requirements. So yes, we'll be within the approved number, and they are about the same cost.
Thank you.
Councilmember Judy.
Thank you, Mayor Mohammed. Real quick, you mentioned in there that the GDOT said that they were not open to the installment payments. Is that correct?
Yes, the response letter I got from GDOT in February said still a lump sum payment at the beginning. Beginning is like the year 2021, but their express lane project construction is 2024 through 2027 per the schedule now. So, and that's the reason for the city to talk about this installment options to begin with. But we could ask again. I'm sure there is flexibility there. But for now, their answer is no. You pay lump sum at the beginning.
So you're recommending that we don't get into that this evening. We when they come to us for the IGA in June, that we start negotiating them. Obviously, hopefully it's post-COVID enough that we can look at, what's going on, and we're far down the road in our budget, before we can have this conversation. But is that what you're recommending this evening?
Well,
Yeah.
excuse me, let me interrupt here. I personally, I will fight this. I will ask them to accept installments in real time. And of course, Director Ralph will do whatever council directs him to do. And he and I have had conversations about this. So I don't believe he's recommending or advising. He might advise and say, I think that we've got some wiggle room here. But my recommendation as the mayor is that we continue to pursue the options of real-time payments on this.
Yes, so we had these conversations, and I just feel that at staff level this could be resolved by the time we get to the IGA, and this would just become another element of the IGA. We may not have to have a very lengthy conversations on that. So if we had more time, maybe it could be resolved at staff level.
Thank you, Mohammed.
Thank you. Yes, Councilmember Hall.
Thank you, Mayor. Mohammed, I had another question on the 2.5 million for the Big Creek Bridge. That's the aesthetics for one bridge that I'm not sure if it's actually smaller than these two bridges that we're spending 2.1 on. Can you address that for me? Help me understand why it's more expensive for just the one bridge versus what we're doing aesthetic wise on the other two.
So it's not as easy as two bridges versus one bridge. It's just like on the express lane bridge, we are adding width to the bridge deck to have a trail in the future. So it's just different, as you can see in this graphic on the screen now. Uh, is that this was I think this was a bigger upgrade than we're talking about now. So that's why I'm just saying the cost of the implementing the current or the aesthetics we are talking now for the other two bridges, implementing them here is definitely not going to be more than 2.5. So, and then again, we don't have any of the details estimates. So hopefully it'll be less than this number that's shown here. But this is what we've had in the budget for the aesthetics on the Big Creek Parkway Bridge.
So why are these $400,000 more than the other aesthetics on the other two bridges?
These are the estimated numbers. In Big Creek Parkway project is the one we have been working for many years. And this is just an estimate that was done a few years ago to get the aesthetics shown on this bridge in this graphic here. So this is a different number run by a different consultant, and what we have on the other two bridges, it's just different estimates done in a different time. So numbers are going to be pretty close, I can tell you that, but these are not exact numbers. These are just initial level estimates.
Also, let me interject, Councilmember Hall. When we discussed the aesthetics for the Big Creek Bridge, the two other bridges were not in play. And we felt as though when we were choosing those options that our T-SPLOST dollars could uphold the aesthetics that we wanted for the Big Creek Bridge. After that decision was made, GDOT came forward with the Holcomb Bridge as well as the Southern Bridge, and they told us that those as well, we would have to pay for the aesthetic upgrades. So we had a conversation, oh gosh, I can't remember when that was, not too long ago, maybe a year or two maybe, that we wanted initially to have the Holcomb Bridge Road and the Southern Bridge reflect the aesthetics of the Big Creek Bridge. Well, we now know that financially that is not, right now, it's not a possibility. So we had made the decision that we would put the infrastructure in place and hopefully have the money to upgrade those. But being realistic, we knew that we couldn't match the Big Creek Bridge and the Southern Bridge to the Southern Bridge and the Holcomb Bridge to the Big Creek Bridge. So that's where we are right now. I hope that helped clarify.
Thank you.
Councilmember Flaherman.
Thank you, Mayor Henry. And so, Mohammed, thank you for the presentation. Great written details, pictures, very helpful. So I think this entire mayor and council and really all staff should feel really excited and proud that here's some specific examples how we're going to help improve traffic by having more bridges and really create a lot of connectivity from our east side and our west side. So I think a lot of hard work that everybody should feel very excited about. So I want to mention that. I also do want to get into a little more of the details and really sharpening the pencil a little bit. And there's two specific things I want to talk about. The first one is in regards to, can you go to the slide where there was the survey, and it was the last survey, the question I think between arches and not arches. This is my first of two things I want to discuss. Excellent. So I have to imagine that with arches is more expensive than without arches. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. So thank you. And so, because without a doubt, when I look at this, I like the including the arches. I do really like the look of it. And so if I were just to be asked this question, I would have responded yes. If there was additional detail talking about the cost and talking about how by spending more, we either need to potentially increase taxes or potentially decrease other things that we'd like to add. So for example, if the choice is between adding arches and filling in some more sidewalk gaps, that's where I no longer say yes for the arches. I do think it's important to get and beneficial to get a good looking bridge, but at the same time, I want to make sure we're doing it fiscally responsible as well. And so here's an example where, although I like the arches, the bottom I think does have a lot of good aesthetic views. So this is how this is kind of my thought process in wanting to really sharpen that pencil, because again, where just as we discussed last time, that's where I had focused on the fact I did not want to spend a lot of money or spend money really on making the bottom of the bridge look beautiful. I wanted to make sure it was making it inviting on the top of the bridge for those that are actually in Roswell, crossing between the east sides and west sides of Roswell. So this is my feeling when it comes to the arch design and really for all these different aspects. So I definitely can understand and completely see where the survey respondents are coming from, but the fact that it wasn't addressing cost and what sacrifices need to be made with those costs is where I get some concern. So that's item number one. I should say example number one I wanted to address for the Holcomb Bridge Road as well as for the expressway. But also now I want to move on to my second comment I wanted to address. So Mohammed, if I'm correct, and let me know if I'm not understanding this correctly, 2.1 million is total for aesthetics for the two. So I realize they're not going to be equal. They're different size bridges. They have different complexities. But pretending they were equal, it just means that they each average 1.05 million. Is that accurate, or are they each 2.1 million for aesthetics?
No, 2.1 million is the total for the two bridges, and I can tell you that the fencing, I'm not sure how much additional cost that arch is going to be on the top, but of course it's going to be more than the no arch option. But then I can tell you the total estimated cost for both bridges for the fencing is about 1.2 million. And remember, one thing I forgot to mention earlier is, so what GDOT needs to do is provide a bridge that's safe for all users. So they would just put a very basic chain link fence. When we are talking about adding to the aesthetics, any additionals, any add-ons, any upgrades, the city would only pay the difference. So the GDOT would still pay the amount towards this fancier fence, and we would only pay the difference. So the total for the fencing for the two bridges is 1.2 million, both bridges. And the only other high cost item I see is that for the express lane bridge, for us to have the trail on it to accommodate pedestrians and bicycles, and then to, of course, have a wider bridge deck. The cost of that is about 500,000. And then I have a couple of smaller breakdown numbers. So fencing is the most important, most costly of the total, at 1.2 million, estimated 1.2 million for both bridges.
Thank you. And so I appreciate for those in the public that have not did not watch the first one, the meeting. It is important they realize exactly how this works and why we're having such a detailed discussion. And I certainly do discuss that we're not going to have chain link fencing, and there's certainly aspects and expenses here. And even example, in the first meeting, I was actually opposed to the even setting up the wiring for the lighting, but this, I think this council did help me see that there were benefits just to be able to set us up for the future and wanting to do that. So I think that even though it was not something I initially supported, I think it was a good compromise. Here's the bigger point that I'm getting at. So we have an average between these two bridges of 1.05 million in aesthetics, and then we have the third bridge, the northernmost bridge, that we're discussing 2.5 million. And I think Mayor Henry did a fantastic job reminding the public on why that's the case. It's because obviously that was just its lone bridge that we were going to be making before these discussions with GDOT. So I totally understand and support all the thought and that went into the design for that most northern bridge. The Big Creek Parkway. That being said, now that we do know there's going to be the opportunity for this southern bridge and the opportunity to improve Holcomb Bridge Road, I do think that we need to look closer at finding cost savings in the northernmost bridge, the Big Creek Parkway. And the reason being is actually a sentiment that we all felt from the beginning. We all felt we wanted these three bridges to look the same. I believe we all felt that way at the time. Before getting into all the financial details, we thought that meant all three bridges were going to look just like Big Creek Parkway. Now we're seeing from a financial standpoint that that's not the it's not the most realistic situation as we all work hard to make sure to save tax dollars as we can. So Mohammed, can you actually go to the slide that goes to the Big Creek Parkway where it shows that 2.5 million?
And let me interject here, Mohammed, when you go to that, I would like to point out that the Big Creek Bridge is T-Splosh money. We can divert T-Splosh money to Holcomb Bridge. However, we cannot divert T-Splosh money to the Southern Bridge. So Mohammed, take it away.
Excellent. And that was a great point, Mayor Henry, as well, important for everyone to realize as well. So definitely want that to be a consideration as we look at this. So right now for Holcomb Bridge Road, it is not T-Splosh money. And we're discussing if we go purely based off an average, that's 1.05 million that we want to spend in aesthetics. And so as I look at right here, let's look at the things that we have that we purposely decided are not going to be the case on the southern two bridges. So number one, and Mohammed, I'm assuming this picture is accurate and up to date and what gets us to the 2.5 million. One of the aspects is I'm assuming those are planters. And this council decided that on the two other bridges, we were not going to go with planters. That did initial savings, but also gave long-term savings by not having to maintain it. And at the same time, for the many people that are very focused on pedestrian and bicycle safety, this council did decide to support something so that there is something in the middle of the sidewalk or the multi-use trail and the road. I suggest that we do that same thing here for both immediate savings as well as long-term savings. Also, frankly, I guess I could go through every single thing, but instead, I want to actually just give the big picture that what I'd like to see staff, and I'd like to see if council supports that we have staff look at this bridge, look at all the design details, and instead base it off exactly what we're going to do the first two. And that will accomplish two goals. One, it will make it so that all three bridges have the same style, look the same, and really fit together as the three Roswell bridges. And number two, as the mayor pointed out, those savings can then be used for Holcomb Bridge Road, which again, an average of about 1.05 million, which given the fact that I'm going to guess that actually is probably more expenses and more of the costs on Holcomb Bridge Road than the new expressway. That might not be the case, but I think that's certainly possible. In which case, I'd love to see how we can get this Big Creek Parkway down significantly to ultimately be the cost savings from this one that we have with our T-Splosh dollars going towards T-Splosh on Holcomb Bridge Road, and that potentially saving taxpayers, over $1 million, which then we have the ability to use for other transportation projects. So that's what I'd like to see. Granted, I do want to credit the design of this. I love how this looked. I do love the planters, the plants, how they look. I do love those. I'm not sure what those pillars are or how to describe them. I love the look of them, but again, my goal is making sure the looks are aligned and saving tax dollars.
And Director Ralph, I'll let you speak in a minute, but let me just interject again. When council sees the proposed budget, you will understand that any cost savings we have will not go to anything else because those cost saving dollars will not be there. Sales tax have been dramatically impacted, and that affects T-Splosh. So I would venture to say, and I don't want to be overcautious, but I would venture to say that what we're looking at is not realistic for any one of these bridges because the T-Splosh dollars are not going to be there. Sales tax dollars are not going to be there. And we are going to be stretched very, very thin. What I would encourage this council to do is allocate or make a decision based on the infrastructure of the bridge. So knowing that we want to do these things, how does GDOT need to build the bridge? Because if and when, I should say, when we recover from this economic downturn as a result of the pandemic, we may recover very, very healthy. We may be able to allocate dollars to this, but I think what the most important thing to do right now is build all three bridges in a way that we can do the aesthetics, we can put lights on them, we can put the planters on them, we can do the sidewalks, we can do the fencing. I would like you all to consider to do the bare bones right now so that if we are able to pump money in the future. But I can tell you right now, with the lack of sales tax dollars and T-Splosh dollars that are rolling our way, I can guarantee you that we are not going to have a savings at Big Creek that we can pump into other bridges. So having said that, Director Ralph.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So one thing I would wanna include in this conversation is so on the other two bridges, the Express Lane Bridge and the interchange at Holcomb Bridge. So of course, that fence comment, that's easy. Whatever you guys decide, we'll move forward with that. But then please understand, those two bridges are in very initial concept level. We are still talking concept, but this Big Creek Parkway Bridge, some of these decisions like having bike lanes on this Big Creek Parkway Bridge and having planters, those decisions again, were made years ago, and we are well into the design of this Big Creek Parkway. Now changing aesthetics, like having a different parapet wall and having a different monument and having a different look, like a brick look versus any different look like this one has. That's one thing. But then changing the width of the deck by eliminating the planters or eliminating the bike lanes, that is something that's significant for this bridge because this is so far into the design. We are actually talking about you have heard that before, the procurement for this one, having a design build team on board as early as spring, summertime of the year 2021. So this one is, I think, far into the design. We could still go back and do whatever the council decides, but I'm just telling you the fact that this bridge is too far into the design effort for the past a few years.
So then let me adjust.
I would also like to add, thank you, that This had extensive public input and it was a direct T-Plus project. So I think that we need to consider that as well. Councilmember Judy.
Thank you, Mary Henry. I don't know. I guess I came out of the last meeting under the impression of what you just said. We were going to build these bridges to as much as we could with the infrastructure to make sure we were able to add when we could financially. There were some things such as the brick underneath, the brook look underneath, which I thought should have been added, but the council didn't go that direction, which is fine. I think the bridge looks very good with the public input. I think for me, all I would like to know is, and I think Mohammed, you've done a good job with it, is what needs to be done so we can build the bridges to look the way we want to in the future when we recover from the situation, and what are those elements that we cannot change, and so we have to make that decision right away. And that was my impression coming out of the last meeting, is what you just said, Mayor Henry. We're going to make sure it was able to be upgraded when we were able to, because even looking at it then before this crisis, it was still a stretch. So you know, Mr. Ralph, I think that knowing what could be changed or what couldn't be changed, the elements that the public wants and the elements we said we wanted is what we really need to know. Then we can kind of like a Lego build after that.
Oops. Director Ralph?
Yes, some of the elements like, we talked about these planters or these bike lanes. So they are included in the concept and design progress so far of the Big Creek Parkway Bridge, but not on the other two bridges. We excluded the planters because of initial cost and the future cost. And you can well imagine we cannot add that much width of a planter on a bridge later on. That would just be not realistic. So planters, bike lanes, those are the type of things that if we ever want to do them now as part of the construction, is the time to do them. But then, certain other things, the minor upgrades, we talked about a lot actually. If you remember all the conversations about the now versus later costs, uh, so off the bridges, on the bridge approaches, there's a lot of opportunity to do landscaping in the future, public art in the future. We have all those options still open to us. And I think we had those conversations in a lot of detail at the end of the year 2019. But again, whatever the city council decides, we are here to take the guidance tonight.
Yes, Councilmember Wilsey.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Henry. And thank you, Mohammed. It's a great presentation. And thank you for taking the time to walk us through everything here. I do agree that the Big Creek Parkway Bridge especially went through a lot of public input, and I think changing the actual footprint of that is not a good place to save money at this point. I think, if there's some aesthetic elements that need to shift and end up being lower cost, that's great. But as far as changing the functionality of that, I don't think is even something we should be talking about here. I did want to get a little bit more information on what the actual design process. You mentioned having to turn design documents over to GDOT later in the fall. Is that correct?
So that's just basically detailed specification of what we want. So like the fence, if we want those square panels in the fence, and if we want the arches, so that's just specifications and details on that. So there is not much to design there, but of course, if the city provides the detailed specifications to GDOT, that document become part of GDOT's procurement document for their design build team that they are actually in process of procuring. So whatever you approve tonight, the specifications and the details on that become part of GDOT's procurement document.
Right. But as far as specifications for exact materials and colors and that sort of thing, is that has yet to be recommended by the design team, or is that still to come going into
So
the final document?
we submit what the city wants, and then if GDOT has an issue with the type of fence that we selected or anything, but which I can tell you that we have been coordinating with GDOT. So the options that we have gotten the public input on and we are sharing with you tonight, they are generally going to be okay with GDOT. They just need the detailed specifications of that, engineering details, if you will.
Right. Well, do those specifications or the recommendations come back to council, or do you go, will there be additional opportunities for public input? Well, you mentioned the pressed brick. I mean, what that color looks like is, the devil's in the details, I think, when it comes down to putting all these things together.
Color, I think, is shown as black on those. And
Uh-huh.
that was actually one of the questions before we tell GDOT, before we give these specifications to GDOT. That was one question I had on the slide was if this work session is enough, or do we want that May 11th council item just to review this information one more time? And we could do it either way. But beyond that, we'd basically be telling GDOT to include in their procurement documents whatever decision we get tonight. So the opportunity to make changes, we can always go back and ask to make changes, but then we need to be ready to expect the response that, okay, now it's going to be this much additional cost and our contractor has already procured material or bought material and stuff like that. So the later we drag this out, we just don't know what to predict on GDOT and their contractors. And so I think sooner we make the decisions, the better for us. And for these with GDOT is still on a very strict deadline. With the COVID-19, we have heard very clearly that they're not changing the schedule at all for this express lane project. They're still moving full speed ahead. And for that reason, they actually requested for us to give all the details to them on May 13th. At staff level, we made a request because after you make the decision, our consultant needs to prepare some documents, some specifications, and we asked for an extension from GDOT at staff level, and they have agreed to receive that information no later than June 3rd. So we have up until June 3rd to give all the details, have our consultant work the details and give them to GDOT. I hope I'm answering your question.
Well, I guess my question was actually, do we or do you, someone in the design team, actually see physical samples of what the materials look like and what the colors will be, how it will be executed? Is that something that we will see at that point, or is that still a little bit of an ongoing process?
So, I mean, if you want to suggest a different color for the fence design we have been talking about today, yeah,
Right, right.
make it
Well, I mean, I
possible.
think black for the fence design is great. I just want to make sure, as far as the sandstone inserts and the brick look is exactly is aesthetically pleasing.
It is going to be as close to as practically possible to these pictures that we have been shown in these work sessions and where we have been getting your guidance. So we're going to, and then, of course, then the field implementation, when the construction work is ongoing, then, between us and GDOT, we have field inspectors to ensure that the contractor is doing the work, doing good workmanship, and installing good quality material and all that. So that becomes part of every project. But like something again, aesthetics wise, they're shown as black today. If you want to change that color, this is a good time, perfect time to actually have that conversation.
Yeah. I mean, I think the black is fine, but also as far as other aesthetic elements that might be incorporated in the design, I imagine that's a conversation that needs to happen, you know, right away as well, correct? For instance, on the sandstone insets, or perhaps something along the multi-use path, the insets that you showed might be a good place to kind of showcase a Roswell story, history, culture, tourism opportunities or things done in a distinctive, tasteful way, like that. There, yeah, like that one with
So,
the square.
if you are thinking public art, so public art was one conversation we had in the beginning, and at the
Right.
time there were some estimated costs mentioned, but that is one thing that could always be done later. GDOT's contractor doesn't have to, apply public art. That is something that could come after the construction time. Anything that could be an add-on, uh, that could be worked on later, because we are still many years away. The completion
Sure.
for GDOT's project is the year 2027. So, and I guess whenever we do those kinds of things, they go through extensive public input process and all that. I think it would be good to do those efforts at that time. Now is just a little too early for the finishing touches on this,
Sure.
on some of this infrastructure. Yeah, that I think could be done later and could be done in a very tasteful and many different ways. It's just, in my opinion, it's just a little too
It's a
soon.
little early for that. Okay, I just wanted to get a better understanding of what decisions, design and aesthetic wise, need to be made right away. Okay, thank you.
Yes, Councilmember Palermo.
Thank you. Mohammed, can you go back to the picture of the Big Creek Parkway? Because I think with the mayor's good points about the fact that T-Splosh dollars gonna be down makes me feel even stronger about what our approach needs to be here. And also the fact that what Councilman Judy said, I agree with it. I felt our position last time when we actually voted at council on what would happen with the first two being Holcomb Bridge and the expressway. My understanding was we were basically voting for it to be bare bones. We were voting on that infrastructure, the size of the bridge, supporting bike lanes and multi-use paths, all those aspects that frankly I didn't really consider aesthetics. I consider more of the usability and what connects the sides. So that's what I felt that we all agreed on with those bridges. What we had not discussed was Big Creek Parkway. Again, mentioning the bike path or the multi-use path, that's not something I consider aesthetics. That's not what I'm referring to. But what we did not do is we did not go through the aesthetics and we did not look at it being from a bare bones standpoint. Because if we look at this picture, if we mention those pillars, those posts, whatever we should be calling those things, that's just an example of something that's not bare bones. There's extra cost. It's going to make it look different from the bottom two. So I feel with the help of staff, we need to go through the same exercise we went on the first two, get this down to be bare bones. What I'm hearing from Mohammed, if I'm understanding you correctly, there are some aspects that I consider aesthetics that you feel is just too far along in the design. For example, the planters. So if that's the case, I say that's fine. I'd prefer to save the money, not have the planters, not have the ongoing cost. But if you're to tell me to not have the planters and have a wall like the other two bridges that we agreed upon would have, then I'm accepting that. But I wanna just understand what are the things that we can reduce here, save money because we're going to have less T-Splosh dollars coming in than we expected, and how can we get this aesthetically to look more like the first two, and how do we get it to be closer to the average cost of the first two? Again, the first two have an average cost of 1.05 million. This one has a projected cost for the aesthetics to be 2.5 million. So Mohammed, I'd love to see from staff, not affecting usability, not affecting the sidewalks or the bike path, but from an aesthetic standpoint, how do we get this one to look more like the other one? And how do we do it from that bare bones standpoint where we're giving ourselves the opportunity for success later on, but still making sure we have the full infrastructure here set up for future success?
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Palermo. So yes, that's the one guidance we need here before, as we heard through the multiple work session and the decision making process in the past several months. We were gonna use the aesthetics you have approved, apply all of them to onto this Big Creek Parkway Bridge. And this 2.5 million number is an estimate from a few years ago for the aesthetics that are shown in this graphic. It looks a lot fancier than what the city council has approved for the other two bridges. So I'm hoping this number is going to go down. And we just didn't think that we were going to need new graphics for this bridge to make it look like the other two bridges. I think we have plenty of graphics for the other ones. So it's just like the other ones, you know, those fences, the one you approved tonight would come here, and that brick look, we would just apply that here. The monuments here in this graphic look a lot fancier than the monuments on the other ones, the pillars. So if we apply those here, it's just going to look a lot different, and most probably will cost less than this 2.5 million number mentioned here. So that was the point all along, that the guidance from the city council was to match all three bridges, and everything that we could do here to make it look like the two others is what we are going to do. And like I said, hopefully cost would be less. And for the as far as this planter that's shown here versus a wall, a 2 or 3 feet tall wall between the pedestrians and the vehicular traffic. I think that's a change that could easily be done. I can't think of a reason why it couldn't be. So that's one thing we could look into. If you want the look to be exactly like the other two, we can remove these planters and put them and make them like a wall. But one point, you know, just if just to refresh our memory, you know, this the wall barrier between pedestrian and vehicles on Holcomb Bridge means one thing, and it means something different. This is Big Creek Parkway. This is where the cars are going to be. It's a very less daily traffic, and you know, bicycles and pedestrians, very low speed. So this is just a different environment. A wall may or may not be needed here. Well, that's now just my personal opinion. You know, between a planter and a wall, this could actually look better with a planter. But it's really whatever guidance you want to give us. Today is a perfect time to do that. So if you would want to see a wall versus these planters, we could look into that.
Mohammed, let me ask you a question. What guidance do you need from us tonight? Because I will say that once we review the revenues and expenses for this year's budget, that might impact our decision as to whether or not we do a wall that's no maintenance or a planter, which is maintenance. So what do you need from us tonight to take us forward? Do you need a general decision on just make sure all these three bridges have the infrastructure in place that we've all agreed on? Do you need us to make design decisions this evening? Or do we, I know we've got till June 3rd, but do we have additional time as far as that goes?
So we really would like to have your guidance tonight, because we need our consultant to prepare the documents to submit to GDOT. And here's a couple of things we need your guidance on. Do we want to move forward with the square fence design versus with the arch style tops, or the vertical with or without the arches? And then the monuments with sandstone concrete accent or not? So those are the two things, and those were the questions that were asked in the public survey. So these are the two things where we need the decision, because we need to prepare the documents for GDOT, and also the decision on to apply these whatever you approved tonight for the other two bridges, apply those same exact aesthetics to the Big Creek Parkway Bridge, because then that would be the direction for staff to move forward in. And then I just had a little question in the end, if you thought we need to bring this to the mayor and council meeting.
Okay, well, and let me just ask this in another way. We're presenting my proposed budget on May 11th, correct? Is that right? Okay, so we're presenting my proposed budget on May 11th. I think that document is going to be an eye opener for the electeds. And if we present that on May 11th, we still have time to come back with your guidance for GDOT, correct?
Yes, we have up until June 3rd, and it's just that our consultant is going to need maybe up to 2 to 3 weeks. So we can bring this back to the same council night, I guess, the May 11th.
Oh, we're on a time crunch here because council will not see the document, the budget document until May 11th. And so there's not enough time for us to digest that and make a decision. Is there any opportunity where we could go bare bones and then beef it up after June 3rd? I mean, I know the consultant needs time for the,
Yeah,
go ahead.
I'm sorry. So what I was going to say is, so we have heard from GDOT very clearly that they're not slowing down on the procurement, and
Right.
there may not be much flexibility on the time uh, there, because it's been several months that we have been working on it, and we have just actively been working on it. There was a few letters exchanged with GDOT after the council made the decision on December 9th. So a lot of work has been done in direction. Of course, you make the decision and give us the guidance if we need to go in a different direction. The point I guess I'm trying to make is now is the time to set the direction, because after today or after a few weeks, there may not be much opportunity to go in a different direction. Because soon, in June, GDOT would be knocking on our door with an IGA in hand based on all these conversations we have been having with them. So at the time, GDOT would expect us to sign that IGA because they would have included some of this information into their procurement documents. So it is a very time sensitive matter.
And thank you, I appreciate that and I understand that. And I do know that GDOT is pressing forward with their timelines and that is their priority. I will say, we are not the only municipality in the state of Georgia that our budget cycle begins July 1st. And I'm sure we're not the only ones dealing with this. And certainly when we went into this agreement with GDOT, when we started discussing this with GDOT, there was no global pandemic. There was no drop in sales tax. There was no drop in T-SPLOST taxes. So while many municipalities are dealing with furloughing employees and laying people off, fortunately for the city of Roswell, we're not in that position at this time. However, I can guarantee you that once council reviews this budget, that is going to cloud their decision on the bridge aesthetics. I can guarantee it. I'm not speaking for council. But so my question is, can we at least defer or deflect this and giving our folks enough time to design it to give us a little bit more time to look at the realities of these projects as they relate to realities of revenues? Did you want to respond to that, Mohammed?
Yes, Mayor, I guess if we could get some direction tonight, and maybe we can schedule another work session, maybe mid-May, uh, to get a response to GDOT by June 3rd. I think that would work as well. But tonight we need to know something about the direction we want to go, because, it takes, some time and effort at staff and our consultants level to prepare whatever you want to see. So if, say, for example, if the city wants to say that, okay, we don't want to spend any of that 2.1 million at all, how would the bridges look and what would that, so that would be an easy direction for us. We just take everything off and show you a picture of what the absolute basic bridge would look like. But we need to tell that to GDOT, hey, that's what we want. and GDOT's absolute deadline is June 3rd for us to do that. So if you give us some more guidance in a certain direction tonight, then I can request another work session or maybe a committee item at the end of May. Even that would work. So a committee item or a mid-May work session would do.
Mohammed, we can give you direction at a committee, but this item has already gone to council, so you could not get a council vote on this. But having said that, Councilmember Tizer.
Thank you, Mayor. Mohammed, first of all, great job with the graphics and drawings. It's very helpful. I wasn't sure how I felt about some of the things we decided on a couple of months ago, but when I see them, it makes quite a difference to me. We're making 40-year decisions here, and while I'm certain that this year's budget is going to have a lot of challenges in it, while I'm certain that this year's T-SPLOS collections will be somewhat problematic, and potentially even awful. I want to remind everybody, we started out at $15 million on this, and we came down to the $2.1 million version, which left us the ability in the future to fancy it up. And I think you've done a great job of giving us some very narrow options to get guidance on. So from my standpoint, I really don't care arches or no arches. That doesn't, aesthetically, if you don't see one, you don't know you like one better than the other, frankly. However, 75% of the people who saw it seem to like the arches. So, over 40 years or so, I'm not sure that makes a ton of difference. The other reason I don't want to get too hung up on how this works with this year's budget is I have a feeling that we're going to see an infrastructure bill come through Congress, and with a little bit of luck, this is a kind of project, since it is designed and shovel ready, that can certainly apply for it. I'm not saying I'm not interested, and I'm not concerned about the budget. Mayor, I've mentioned to you, I'm very concerned and have some idea of just how short it's going to be just doing the math here in my home office. But these are long-term decisions. We started at $15 million. We've got a $2.1 million version with the ability to flex up over time. So I think that's good. And my guidance to Mohammed is the things that you're asking for, I think are reasonable. I think if people want to take a look at the Big Creek Bridge and do some work on that, I don't think that's something that GDOT needs to hear about, by June. So I'm fine with that, with people looking at that. But I think Councilmember Wilsey makes a good point. The public really weighed heavily in on that. And I think that's really where I'm at. I do think, Mohammed, that on the payment option, over time or not, we're talking about 2027 now. I think now that there's been a pandemic, I think you'll and the effect that they're going to feel on their budgets at the state level, I think you're going to see that request ease up quite a bit. I think they understand the issues and problems we have. And I think that between now and 2027, there ought to be a way we can come up with the $2.1 million for that part of that bridge. And, if we are able to do some redesign that doesn't violate, kind of what the public thinks for the Big Creek Bridge, I think that number could come down even more. But I think that is about where we are, bare bones, arches or no arches. So, I would just caution us to remember that we're looking at a very, very long-term decision here for the city. And I think, we've come down to a pretty reasonable point and some good compromises to get here. So I would encourage us to give Mohammed some guidance as to the three important things that he needs tonight. And I think we've we've maintained the flexibility we'll need ongoing. But I would say that the payment option piece, based on what we're going to see budget-wise, is a non-starter for us. We really do need them to accept that over time. Giving them $2.1 million for 4, 5, 6 years, that's just not very feasible for a municipality in today's world. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Tizer, and I would agree with you that we need to look at this for the long haul. However, I would also just caution everyone that it was, Mohammed, what was it? Within the last month, we've asked for them to consider payments over time, and they came back and said no, no, and no. So we will continue to push that. And my personal position, if I am given a chance to vote, is that we do put everything in place infrastructure-wise to move forward. I don't have an issue. Actually, I like the bridge without the arches, but I'm just one person. But just moving forward, and then Mohammed, correct me if I'm wrong, GDOT has given us the options of what they will build without additional cost to us. And I think that we were all in agreement with that in the last work session that we had. But then going forward, we wanted to make sure that the bridge could take the load no matter what we're doing. And I would not ever propose, as I said before, Big Creek went through extensive public comment. It was a specific T-SPLOST project. And I think that we need to be cognizant of that. But also, and I could be wrong, Councilmember Tizer, you talk about this year's budget. I don't think that this year's budget is going to be the only effect on us. I think it's going to be on several budgets going forward. And what we spend here affects other capital projects. So my vote is we put the infrastructure in place and go with the GDOT plan for the stacked stones, whatever it is, and move forward with it and just make sure that the bridges can take the load for anything that we want to put on it in the future. And so, in my opinion, the 2.1 is the minimum. I don't think we need to design over that amount.
I think I was agreeing with you, Mayor. The 2.1.
Oh, were you? Any additional comments, questions from council? Yes, Councilmember Zapata.
Thank you, Mayor. So just to clarify here, what is the time frame for the Big Creek Parkway Bridge? Question number one.
So we are thinking, so far we are shooting for starting the procurement using the design build method in the spring, summertime of the year 2021. But please understand, we have been actively working on the design of that project to bring it to a certain level of design percent complete, so we could hire a design build consultant who's going to finish the design and then construct it for us. And that method of procurement, design build method, was approved by the city council in the last 6 to 8 months.
Okay, so is it fair to say that the Big Creek Parkway maintaining the operational part, the operational aspect, is going to follow kind of like the aesthetics of the dedicated lanes or express lanes bridge, either under the bridge and on top of the bridge?
If that's the guidance you give us tonight, then yes.
Okay, so this is what I would like, to make it consistent, and hopefully we can save, back to the planters on the Big Creek Parkway Bridge, if we can save money on construction and future maintenance cost without the planters and just follow the same design of the dedicated lanes or express lanes bridge, I think that this is something that I will like to support, given that if it's going to save in construction cost and future maintenance cost. And then under the bridge, on the Big Creek Parkway Bridge again, I would like to follow the same aesthetics that we discussed and approved on the other bridge south of the Holcomb Bridge.
Thank you, Councilmember Zapata. Councilmember Wilsey.
Yes, I would also support going forward with the aesthetics options that were voted on and preferred by the public for the two bridges as well as Big Creek Parkway. And I do think this is a long-term decision right now. There will be a recovery. I will be optimistic, even though it might be, we don't really know what that time frame is, but I do think we need to be forward-looking and make sure we're putting the right thing into place for the city.
Councilmember Palermo.
Thank you, Mayor Henry. So yeah, as I go through, here's my positions on things. For the payment option, I agree with the mayor as well as I believe everyone else of really wanting to work with GDOT for more appropriate payment timing. As for the aesthetic options, from that standpoint, that's where the 2.1 base, I think it's something I do support for those two bridges. There are a number of aspects in there that were not my ideal, but at the same time, I think this council did come to a good compromise. As for the aesthetic choices, those three choices that we were given, again, I do feel it's a 40-year at least decision, which is why it's so important, the infrastructure setup of bike lanes, of all having multi-use trails, et cetera. But as for these aesthetic items, actually something Mr. Tizer mentioned really resonated, the fact that side by side, you see which one you like more perhaps, but without it, bottom line is we are making an attractive bridge that's not just gonna have a chain link fence. So given for cost savings purposes, my preference would be to currently not have the three more expensive versions, instead have staff go with the three lower cost options for each of those. Again, as I mentioned, getting into number 3, I strongly believe that Big Creek Parkway, the aesthetics, not functionality, the aesthetics need to come down to be so that it looks and matches everything we've decided for the bottom two bridges. My hope is that 2.5 million gets a lot closer to the 1.05 million. And then, I lean towards thinking this is something we should officially vote on to make sure that staff's absolutely, clear on what our guidance is. But thank you for this time.
Thank you, Councilmember Palermo. Additional comments from council. Director Ruff is looking for your guidance. Yes, Councilmember Judy.
I believe the 2.1 as a base is where we need to be. Do the arches, which the public wanted at 2.1, in the sandstone at 2.1, then I think we should do what the public wanted when it comes to that, based upon the survey. And I also, it doesn't matter. I could do this at a city council if necessary. But again, I think this is the gateway to our city, and we need to make sure it looks as nice as we can and have the bones in place to be able to add to it as we continue to thrive over the coming years.
Additional comments from council? Yes, Councilmember Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Henry. Yes, I agree that we need to have the basic or the minimum infrastructure in, and I agree that we move forward with what we have decided on the 2.1. I would have liked to, I actually still would like to know what the difference is, if it's 200,000 or 400,000 between the arches and the sandstone, because I think that could be an important decision. I don't know how much more sidewalks that could buy, but that could be something. But I would support moving forward. I wish we had that information.
Okay, so yes, Councilmember Zapata.
Thank you, Mayor. So actually, do we have the cost of the two options that were put in front of the public for vote? Did the cost was provided for them at the time of the vote, or was just the design without the dollar sign in there?
So
So we did not provide the cost. Please remember, this 2.1 million number, the estimated 2.1 million number is what the city council approved at a council meeting on December 9th, 2019. Staff's job was to come up with a couple of different options within that price range, go to the public, see which one would they like. So the cost difference is really not huge. We are, like I think Councilmember Tizer said, we started with the options of $15 million and we brought this down to 2.1. So everything that the public saw is within that cost range, and the city council approved that cost range. So it's not going to be much of a difference between the arches or no arches, the squared or the vertical uh, elements. So no, the public did not see those minor differences in the cost. We can bring those back at the council meeting on May 11th, if you like.
Well, Director, excuse me, Councilmember Spada, I didn't mean to cut you off, but what I was going to suggest is that we propose to our consultant the $2.1 million moving forward, along with the recommendations from the public. So if we can get the agreement of council, we can give you clear direction. And I apologize, Councilmember Spada, I thought you were finished.
No, thanks, no problem. So when you talk about slight difference, we're talking about $2,000-3,000 difference between one option and the other one.
I'm not
Can we
sure.
define slight difference, the meaning of that? If a couple thousand, is 10,000, is 100,000? I don't know.
I don't know the answer to that, but I made a note for myself. We'll bring that information to the city council meeting on May 11th.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so Mohammed, let me ask you this. So if we go with the $2.1 million and the recommendations from our citizens, you also would like to know whether or not we need you to bring this back to a council meeting. And I would suggest we do. So, and we not vote in a work session. However, I would like to know if council is agreeable to that or not agreeable, and we can just move forward. Yes, Councilmember Hall.
No, I was just giving you a thumbs up.
Okay, thumbs up. Thank you.
We don't know how else to vote.
Got a thumbs up. We can't vote, but just direction for staff. Anybody else just disagree with this, or I just want to make sure we're all heard. Okay, Mohammed, I think you've got clear direction.
Yes, so, okay, you're all good. Thank you so much. I appreciate the guidance and the direction.
And you sound a little bit concerned here. Did we give you everything you need?
Yes, I guess what I'm hearing is we'll bring so on the slide, looking at I guess we can bring the cost differences between the arch versus the no arch style to the May 11th council meeting, and then the sandstone versus the stamped brick facing, just those cost differences. And then we'll bring also the cost for number 3. If we apply these same aesthetics to the Big Creek Parkway, what would the difference be if and how much it would be less than 2.5 million number we have. So yes, I think we're good. We'll be prepared for those few additional pieces of information at the council meeting, and hopefully get your the formal decision from the city council.
Thank you, Mohammed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Palermo.
Thank you, Mayor. My just question is, Mohammed, if anything you have in advance, I'd appreciate as soon as you could send to this council, just so we can see those numbers as far in advance of the May 11th as possible.
Okay, we can definitely try to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional comments, questions from council? We are adjourned. I'll see you at 7.
Thank you.
Thank you.